Hello, everybody, and welcome to Clutch or Kick episode 3. And we've got some guests rotating in and out. We got Golden Boy out because he's a bit of a boomer. We don't really like him that much. We got Johnny back, changing out. And of course, we've got Pansy, who's joining us as well. Recently commentated the Immortals First Light. Thanks for joining us, Pansy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Good to be here.
Yeah, there's a variety of stuff to talk about as well.
That's the most official you've ever sounded, Bren.
I'm a little bit nervous when we get like these new guests in because I feel like, do I have to shape up a little bit with the intros?
Absolutely not.
Just be yourself, Bren.
It could be just I've had a very productive day today, and it gets my mind in that kind of area,
Nice.
It's easy to be loose when I've only got one thing to do all day, but it's been non-stop. But we'll dive straight into it, I guess. The Ranked has finally been announced by Riot Ziegler. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. But he said that they're finally bringing it out next week. What was that?
Thank fuck for that. Yeah. I mean, I was just mocking your pronunciation of the Riot guy's name, but I don't know what any of them are called. I'm calling them all sorts of shit over the past couple of weeks. Thank fuck for Ranked being back. Playing unrated is like, it's devastating for my mental. I can't handle it. We are either playing with good players and just getting rolled to pieces, or playing against clowns, and there seems to be no in between.
Yeah, I think it's worse if you solo queue though, because that's what the first thing that I found. Even when they just released the game, when they finally released it, and I was playing unrated games late at night, you get these games where the distribution of MMR, there's no upper or lower limits. They just chuck in whoever. Against whoever, and what you end up with, you end up with one guy who's dropping 40 bombs against the other guy who's dropping 40 bombs with 4 iron players. In most of the times, at least, that's what I find it's like. But yeah, about time. But it sounds like they're going to be coming in with some changes as well. A lot of people weren't happy with it. Thinking back to the ESPN poll that they did, where they asked a bunch of pro players what they wanted out of it. A lot of them wanted a solo or duo queue. Do you think that is even necessary in Valorant?
Man, I mean, it always sucks to go against like the communities, the community, and everyone's going to want everything they can get, right? I don't think there's a huge problem in putting it out there, but also the game's not meant to be played in like a solo queue aspect, in my mind at least. When you come to like competitive FPS games, I think it's a bit weird to kind of encourage solo queue as such. I honestly couldn't care less. I just think people, they want something and they don't realize the downsides, and then you're going to have like longer wait queues. And again, like if people didn't like the ranking system initially, and the MMR's even kind of harsher split, and you can't queue with your mates anymore, and you're going to be in a longer queue time, you're going to be in a solo queue only against other solo queued players. There's certainly downsides. I honestly couldn't care less. I play with the same 4 people, like 5 or 6 people. For me, it makes absolutely no ends. I don't want to solo queue Valorant, if I'm honest, or any other FPS game. It's a meme in CSGO for a reason. You know what I mean? Like it's an absolute shit show. Normally, it's just like the worst kind of people just crammed together in a box. So I don't care that much, honestly. I'm just happy that Ranked is coming back because, as you said, it's just been like a clown fiesta for the last couple of days, and I honestly haven't had that much time to play, but it's been pretty atrocious. So I'll just be happy to have Ranked back. I honestly couldn't care less about solo or duo queue.
Do you feel like, this is a question to everyone, do you feel like perhaps the ranked experience in Valorant is very like compressed, where it's like a very small spectrum, to say Overwatch, where we have like 5,000 SR and you win like what, like 20 if you win? It feels like in Valorant, when I play it in a way, in the beta, you don't really have that, you don't really have that understanding of where you are in your rank. Like how many games do I have to win to be promoted? How many games do I have to lose to be demoted? And I also felt like the player skill level was very compressed in that I could be way better than someone who's maybe, just like 2 ranks below me. And similarly, they could even be like bad people above me. It felt like it wasn't really fleshed out yet. And I understand that comes from the game being pretty young, in that, we haven't really seen the top players really evolve to that level where they use their abilities correctly and they separate themselves from the guy who relies on aim. We'll get to the meta conversation later. But it does feel like the game just needs more time, and maybe we need to increase the spectrum a bit in where we place players so that there's more separation between ranks.
Well, I think that's the justification why they didn't bring Ranked out immediately, because they based the initial placements off of unranked MMR. So that's
you can actually tell that the unrated MMR is doing its job already, though. And we were playing some games with Gangster from Immortals. Well, yeah, we got absolutely dominated. Like, we could just get rolled because the people that we're playing against are somewhere between our MMR, which is probably somewhere in like Diamond, and then his MMR, which is like right up at the top. And the people that we're playing against are just dominating us because he's the only player that was good. So there is some component of that hidden MMR system. I think that they just made the K value really big. Like, you know how ELO is determined, and you can like change the K value to determine how big the jumps are. Like, you can, if you win a game, you might get a shit ton of ELO. It just seemed like it was really quick to level up and level down. But I think you need that in a beta because it's only out for like, I don't know how long was it even there? It was like 3 weeks.
It's a short form, right? They don't have much time to collect information. Yeah,
Could you imagine if it took forever to rank up? And like, you're playing your games and no one ever gets the highest rank because they just couldn't. Just because you couldn't get that much ELO within the frame of time that it was open.
Yeah, I mean, for me especially, it's like I played I think it's like they called it like the friends and family thing, you know, where it was like closed side of things, and then it went open. Like I played through that, you know, played a couple of games, played into ranked, and honestly, for me, I just got bored already. It's like you hit the rank you hit, and there was nothing else to go for. I think, especially towards the top end, they need to create more to aim for. Not having a visible like MMR ELO sort of thing is kind of boring, especially. And again, this is early days, so I feel a bit stupid or a little bit harsh kind of being this critical, because honestly, compared to most games on release, they had more than like other products of a similar caliber. I mean, CSGO didn't have it for a long old time, you know, to the similar format, but it does need to be better than it is. It seems so basic. I want to almost like, I think I was discussing this a while back, and, you know, Fortnite apparently has, you know, the in-client tournaments. I want there to be like an in-client ladder system properly, not just, you know, here's your rank, have fun. If you play with, you know, the same, let's say 7 players that you've, you know, allotted to a roster, you can then climb up a ladder for other
that'd be
people
sick.
For that, you know what I mean? Like
that would be dope.
like almost like a clan-based thing, or, you know, whatever you played on back in the day, where it was like you get your buddies on and you try and grind the ladder up. That to me would be so much more fun than just, you know, queuing randomly and, okay, well, I'm with my buddies and that's it, right? Like it didn't feel that good to me. And honestly, the skill disparity was pretty harsh. I think that you could tell when you were, especially in like a puggy game, right? If you were in like a natural like matchup, then that's a little bit different. You're playing like the private gathers, then, you know, leave that where it is. But you could tell the disparity pretty quickly between someone who's played like a Counter-Strike style game, who's got the fundamentals down, even at the same, like, let's say, you know, rank as you, and then someone who doesn't. It's not, I don't care about your scoreboard, I care about how you approach a round. And you could instantly tell the people who don't know what a default is, or an A hit, or a site hit, or, you know, how to use the utility correctly. It's just like, it was a bit of a struggle, and it's not gonna be easy. I mean, you know, it's hard to get a good system down, but I hope it's like a work in progress, and they don't just go, enjoy your ranks, boys, have fun, here's some more skins, you know.
A leaderboard would be amazing, I think, for like solo queue at the top level. And then I totally agree with your idea of like an in-game tournament system, or like a 5-stack ladder that just gives your team like some kind of elo. Those are amazing things for being able to scout people as well. And like, I guess what the people at the top really want is some way of determining who is actually good. Like, you need some measure of your worth. That's the whole point of investing that many hours. You want to be told that you're good, or at least be able to, you know, showcase that you're good. So yeah, I think it's the way to go.
To go with that, I also kind of miss like a profile kind of thing that we have in Overwatch, where you can see what heroes people play, so you can sort of fill based on that information. And also, it would be cool to see people's peak rank, because I think that adds so much more respect to your teammates, like when you queue up with people, whether you're solo queuing or you're playing in a party, because it is a team game, and it is very much based around abilities. And so having that information to be able to play to your team's strength, I think is very important for when you actually queue up for ranked and try to get the best experience.
It is super weird having your friends on the side on the right and being like, I've no idea what rank you are, actually. I can't like right click on your name and see what rank you are. Can you play with me? I'll invite you to a party. Oh no, shit, you're bronze 2, get out.
And also, if Josh has a super low win rate on Reyna, I want to see that, so I know what I'm getting.
Dude, my Reyna win rate is absolutely atrocious. I've been horrifically burnt by Leah so many times. I'm convinced it's the most OP shit in the world. So I just throw it out and expect it to gift me kills. And I just run in and die every single time.
I don't know how you can't make it work in just like random games. Like, I honestly think like high-end games, Reyna is, I want to be proven wrong. I just think she's a one-trick pony with the Lear. Everything else is useless. I mean, people are just sitting on ults constantly. There was maybe a discussion to be had about her ability to reposition with an operator, but would I put her above Jett in that aspect? No. So it's like, literally, the Lear is OP as hell. That probably will get nerfed regardless, but it's a pub stomper for sure. I mean, you should be getting that nice high elo off your Reyna games.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, Josh. I think the main complaint is that people want a system that can prove who the best is for scouting purposes, right? Like an idea of actual true path to pro, if you will, where you can play this system and grind it out and get good at it until you become, basically you're in the spotlight and people can pick you up. And the current system, at least what they had in beta, wasn't that, because it's essentially a copy of the CSGO system, which is pretty shit if we think about it. It's like it's slightly better because the CSGO system, every time I go to play CSGO every 3 months, I get decayed down about 5 ranks. But
I'm in silver again.
I'm silver, cool. But they've said that they're actively working on it, so we just got to wait to see what they're going to release. You know, it seems like they've taken on board a lot of feedback. Like I said, the ESPN poll came out. They seem, from what I've seen of dev interviews, they seem pretty set on not doing like a solo duo queue separately. They're very much of the idea that, I think all of us here, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but the idea is it's a team-based game, it's a team-based tactical shooter, you know?
Yeah,
I do think it's and again, this kind of shatters the illusion that people grind for, right? But it's like people in CSGO thought, oh, well, once I hit global, I'm going to understand high-level games. Or once I start playing Face It, I'll be closer to, you know, getting towards, you know, Get Right or whoever you're looking up to. And you're still so far away. Again, it's like you can create these in-game systems to prove that you can grind a game and frag out individually, but does that work in a collective? No. Like, half the time, these kids never get picked up. I mean, we're seeing a lot of those younger generations kind of switch over who did well in CSGO, got, you know, high end in ESEA, FPL, all of these like solo queue ladders. And then when they tried to slot into a team, didn't work. I mean, and I think the big example or an easy one to go to would be Tens. He got picked up by the big org after being this kind of like, you know, kid who grinded like mad, got picked up and didn't gel with the team, didn't gel with the roster, maybe just wasn't quite there yet on that same sort of level. And like the jump up from being just, you know, an individual fragger, you know, being able to really play your class well doesn't mean you're going to be good for a team in any environment. I mean, I think that's going to be a bit of a difference. I think it's going to be a learning curve and it'll take time for some of these people to catch up, especially like, how do I be a good teammate beyond I can get a couple of frags, but, you know, do those frags win you rounds, right? It's like, I'd say in the last maybe year or two, you're seeing some of those players actually get taken seriously in CSGO. The ones who kind of made it through the FPLs, made it through these kind of like private site own, you know, like the private games that go on the side. And that took years for them to even be like, you know, considered, right? So it's like, I think it's a nice idea. Will it mean you're going to be the next big pro? No, but I'm sure people will believe that anyway and grind it. So why not give them something to focus on, right?
I think people like to look at the outliers as well. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pansy, but I think like Zywoo just fucking shit on everyone in FPL forever until he was picked up. And then it was a bit of a surprise, honestly, that he still did it at the pro level. So he's maybe like the outlier that proves the rule that you don't normally do it.
That's it, right? It's like everyone goes, it's the exception, not the rule. I mean, then you look at Simple, who's arguably one of the best in the world, right? You could put him up there with anyone else, and I think that's a really fair assessment. But did he have an attitude problem for a while? Was he overlooked for a while? Was he seen as this, you know, individual player for a while? Yes. You know, he was not the Insta CIS roster pick. And eventually he probably had to adjust the attitude, kind of learn how to play in a collective and play in a team. And, you know, again, he is the exception to the rule, which is great. Maybe this will create some of that. But I think, you know, the wishful optimism of, well, I hit global in CSGO. Why am I not being taken seriously on HLTV? I don't understand. You know what I mean? It's like... there's still a big disparity as to what it makes or what it takes to be in like a high tier element, but it's not a bad way to give people a route, right? Like, again, I just think that if we see Face It's, ESEA's, third-party sites picking up this, it'll probably take over the in-game queue regardless. So we'll see.
Well, that's another question as well, is will Riot even let them make a third-party system? Because Face It have tried, right? But the issue is it's all self-moderated. It's not automatic as far as I'm aware, so... don't
the League of Legends have this like challenger kind of queue that is strictly for like challenger, or is that just a separate rank? Like, couldn't you just implement like a separate ranked? So it's like I took a lot of Ubers and I got like Uber Diamond and I like unlocked that special. Let me go with this analogy.
Holy shit! All right.
And you unlock this kind of like separate thing where you can like get preferred riders or whatever. But similarly in Valorant, say like you reach. Shut up! Shut up, Josh! Quiet! Silence! I'm talking. So you reach the Valorant rank and you get like a separate queue within the game. And essentially you can only queue with other Valorant people, and you get like the typical tooltips where it's like, hey, this queue is probably going to take a bit longer for you to actually find teammates because it's a very like narrowed down queue, and we emphasize on quality games. Couldn't you just do that within the client itself, or do you really need like third party like Faceit and ESEA to step in?
I think
if the game provides the tools, right? You get your pick and ban phase, you get people strictly moderating it, like kicking people out if they are like how long do you let people play in there? Someone's going to lose a game, obviously, but how many losses do you allow that to happen? And
True.
I mean, I think it's player moderated in the highest levels of Counter-Strike, if I'm not mistaken, and it's like a single turnover. So they'll go, actually, this player, his comms weren't that good, his attitude wasn't right. This guy's got, he's got potential, but maybe not this season, maybe next season. How do you do that automatically, right? How can you tell how valuable a player is to a team? As I said, they can frag out, but have they got the most garbage attitude in the world that no one wants to be in a team with, right? It's like, how do you make that happen without having a player having invested interest, right? How do you have it without like a commissioner almost style approach? But I don't know. I'd like the idea of like a separate rank. Hit the top and then you can only play within that rank or something else. There's got to be like a more of a chase there, right?
I feel like a lot of people point towards the League of Legends system as something that's done really well. But I think a large difference between League and Valorant is that you can't just frag out in League. Like you can't just be an all aim, no brain player. You have to have you have to have the game sense and the ability to work with your team just to reach that level, because there is no. I mean, there are mechanics with certain. Yeah, I mean,
you're also forgetting
how
that there
far
are
can your
set
mechanics
roles.
take you?
Set roles in League as well. Outside of that, like how do you do set roles in Valorant? There's a lot of variables you got to overcome, right? A lot of stuff you got to overcome. Let's shift the conversation over to what we've been seeing in the pro level regarding a meta, because we've seen. So I remember the last time we recorded this was talking about Sage as a character.
Don't you believe me?
That.
Okay, but I said that we might start to see a lot less Sage.
Did you?
I think I did.
He did in the first episode, and then the second episode, he said that he quite liked Sage, and now we're in the third episode.
Yeah, and now I've changed my mind a little bit, but I'm not entirely convinced, Josh. I know you've been the biggest advocate for not running Sage comps anyway.
No. I just said that some people would start to do it.
I heard you coached the team that ran it as well. The latest Immortals tournament.
I coached Mix-Up. Yeah, that's how they were nearly able to beat Cloud9. Yeah, I'm a legend. Don't worry about it. I thought that the pick rate would drop to like within the 90% instead of being 100%. I think there was one team in Europe that didn't run it, and then we saw in the Cloud9 Mix-Up game a couple of teams trying it. And I was talking to the Immortals coaches as well, and they said that a few teams have actually been trying this, where they run triple duelist and then a smoker and a cypher, and try and kind of run with that, with the idea, I guess, just being that you overwhelm, you play at a faster pace.
I don't think that'll work. As long as Sage is the only one that has a heal, how are you going to get away with that? Because it's so valuable having a character that every 45 seconds, Josh, can just top somebody up to 100 health.
Heal, man. It's not the heal. It's the slow. It's the wall.
But they keep nerfing the slow. They keep nerfing the wall. The wall is pretty much useless, I think, at this point. I'm not even joking.
No,
it takes a full clip to break.
I still think it's pretty bad. Like, especially
you gotta reload. Like, you can't kill the wall and kill
with
someone.
the amount that players are now picking Raze as well, like on top of that, where Raze is going up and up and up in the pick rate, and a Satchel is so good at taking out the wall. I think the wall becomes less of a component, just in general. The decay rate, the health reductions, every nerf that's been put into place, they keep nerfing her slows as well. She's becoming less and less effective at anchoring. She's still the best, I think, outside of maybe Cypher at like anchoring a site. But the heal is the thing that will always keep her in contention, because she's one of the only characters that supplies it to anyone. If you'd win out a trade duel and they're on like 20 health, okay, top them up. Now their chances of winning the next aim duel go up so much.
I mean, she also has a res, which is obscene in a game like this. Like, can we just, for a second, consider that? It's like...
We have Mercy. We know. Okay.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't mind the idea of it, particularly if there's a matchup you feel you can get away with it, you can drop her. But I think it's I think it's unnecessary to drop her. Honestly, I mean, her utility kit is still very, very viable. Every single piece of her utility kit is good. It may not be as OP as it was, but it's still good. Her res is sick as well. I mean, I don't see why you'd start running without it. And I think we saw it, especially in the tournaments recently that were running without it. They just didn't have kind of the mid-round, I want to say control, or the kind of like, you get that little bit of a buffer. If you don't kind of hit those instant contact plays or those pieces, we saw, you know, people starting to run comps with limited amounts of smoke as well. They're just kind of like going all in on kind of more DPS style. Yeah, exactly. Just like running. And again, if you are in a game where you are just out fragging them, sure. But I promise you, eventually you're going to hit an even skilled team and you will lose because of that. You won't have those executes. You won't have the ability to kind of, you know, hold, you know, after plant situations. You won't be able to get that res to get that one-man advantage to be able to trade in easily. It's too valuable to run without for now. I've liked seeing rosters change up. I like seeing Omen. I like seeing Viper. I like seeing, you know, a little bit more of those agents. I think they are incredibly viable. Dropping Sage for them is dumb as fuck, and you should look elsewhere. Like,
there it is.
I don't like that. I really don't like it.
Yeah, I think Sage is still very much strong, but I feel like, you know, she now finally has a purpose. Whereas before, you sort of like no brain kind of picked Sage all the time because she was so strong. But now you have to actually like think about how you use her abilities and how you position. And I think the biggest shift we've seen in that regard is how some teams now run Sage on A because it's a tighter choke and to get more value from your
Wait,
slows.
what map?
And
What map?
Split. Sorry.
Oh, right.
I don't know why I didn't say the map.
Split
Yeah,
on the screen.
yeah. A on Split. So instead of running mid, because the mid area is now so open on Split, so it's harder to get value from your wall and your slow. So some teams instead, they utilize Sage on the A side, so you cannot get through that choke as easily. So that at least showcases that Sage is still very much strong, where like in those tight choke points. And I still think we'll see a lot of use in that regard. But now you actually need a purpose behind your Sage pick in a way that I don't think we've seen in the beta so far. But for example, on A bind, you still very much can execute with a Sage wall to split off the site, and then you can get value from the slow. So you have to be way more precise where you're using your Sage and how you throw down your abilities.
I thought it was pretty interesting watching the C9 versus Mix-Up game when they were playing on Bind, actually, because for starters, it strikes me as one of the maps where you can get away with the Sage on defense the most, because you don't normally run the Sage on point A, and on point B, it's not like Sage can lock down an area. It's not like on Split or on Haven where she just straight up hardcore locks down like Haven C, for example, if you play her over there, or walls off mid or something like that. You normally play her in a bit more of like using the slow, and then the wall is saved, and she plays with the Cypher on A quite a bit, or maybe the wall showers. But the problem is with these default executes on A, like everyone and their mum knows how to do a default execute on A now on Bind with the Sage, and you get the little Timmy who you've tried to blackmail into playing Sage on your team, and you're like, all right, son, you only need to know one thing. You run in, you ignore the gunfire, and by God, you are going to put that wall down. And if you die for it, I don't give a fuck. And they instead had to put so many smokes, and I feel like it's so easily countered by just more aggression.
I do want to highlight as well that it is just us. No, I do just want to highlight that game is just you. Look at the scoreboard at the end of that game, because that was not anything to do with good composition picks. That was to do with Tens dropping, I think, like 30, 40 kills.
I want to talk.
So you know what?
No, you're interrupting Pansy. Let her speak.
Eat your pizza. You can't turn up on time. You can shut up. No, I mean, like that game composition-wise was garbage, if I'm honest. Like, I didn't like the picks for it. I think it got allowed to do what it did, especially on the attacking side, because Tens went off. And you can't always depend on a player dropping 30, 40 kills. But Tens is good enough that he can do pretty well at that. But it shouldn't mean you think that composition is correct. I think they had to overwork. I mean, they put Tens, up on a plateau, and luckily for them, he was able to get to it. But when we went to maps where you can't be as individually powerful, I think it was Split it went on to, and he struggled to make the same level of impact. You can see the lack of composition potentially being a problem. So it's like, again, like, just pick Sage. Don't pick Phoenix. Phoenix is shit. There's pick a better character. I mean, pick a better agent. Do something else. Like, I really don't like Phoenix as a pick in that. Like, there's so many weird picks, and I don't know. I think people are just kind of going with what they think works, and still some sort of preference picks over what works for like the meta.
Yeah. So this sort of leads us to our next topic. Do you want to move on, or do you have a point, Bren?
I was going to move into your next topic, Johnny.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
he's so well trained, our little pet host. We've developed over these
next topic. I was about to say.
What are we eating today, Bren?
I was about to say, what am I eating? I'm eating a pizza with just some vegetables and ham on it. It's got like pineapple, some sun-dried tomatoes. I don't believe in that in this whole argument where people go on about pineapple pizza and they take sides. It's okay.
You don't believe in the argument?
Yeah, I think the argument is like...
You have a Hawaiian sat in front of you. You said that it was a pizza with vegetables, and then you added ham. And what you've actually got in front of you is a literal, just the definition of a Hawaiian pizza. You just got a ham and pineapple pizza.
Technically it has no vegetables because the tomato is a fruit.
True.
It actually has no vegetables at all. But yeah, I think people who, just to sidetrack us for a little bit, I think people who come up with the argument about pineapple on pizza and they stand so firmly on one side or the other, just people with no personality. They use it as like a little filler for like a personality. They take a side in the argument. A bit like religion, but we're not going to dive into that. Let's talk about the meta.
What are you going?
Let's talk about.
Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta leave.
Let's talk about the meta.
I'm gonna be in trouble.
So there's an argument to be made that there was a meta and it's developing, but I think what we're seeing more often these days is that teams are just finding a style that suits their individual players a lot more. So what we were originally seeing was like teams focusing a lot on like how can they play as a team together with the Brimstone, the Breach, the Sage, the Cypher, and what would be filling that? Just
Sova, did you mention?
Yeah, Sova or anything else, essentially, just a filler character. We've shifted away from that, and it's more moving towards, I suppose, filling into the strengths of the players you've got on the team and playing a more puggy style. Because if you play a hard and fast style that suits your strengths, you're going to dismantle the team that tries to play to the so-called meta because they're just not disciplined enough to play a meta, I think, right now. Yeah. Initially, at least. I don't know if you guys agree with me.
I got a bit of a follow-up to that, or just to add to that, where I was watching Hip 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 play, I think it was...
I hate that name, by the way, because I always want to say hooray at the end of it. So it doesn't make any sense.
Oh, well, that's your problem, not mine. But I was watching this map on Split, and it felt like Hip Hip Hip. They were playing this triple duelist. Shut up, Josh. They were playing this triple duelist composition and just literally running in on B. And they were just like steamrolling in on B every round almost, it felt like. And I was watching that, and a part of me was just like, is this what Valorant is about? So I wanted this to be like more of a broader discussion about where we want to see this game really go when it comes down to the meta. Do we want to strictly see more engages, or are we appreciating like triple duelist compositions? Do we want to separate ourselves from Counter-Strike as we know it, or do we appreciate basic stuff like swinging or like aim duels and like a bit of a puggy style? Where do we want to see the meta develop and where the game should go?
I don't personally think that the game should tend towards just 5-man rushes on a bomb site. I think that's the most boring way that the meta could possibly develop for a game like this. I think you want to incentivize things that are more maybe a little slower and a bit more spread out, which is why I haven't really been too bothered about Sage being like a hard anchor for a site, because she does something to stop this 5-man rush, because the maps are designed like a single choke point anyway. And some of the most boring rounds for me are when the team just attacks and just runs in. They trade a couple of kills and then there's a retake position. It feels very formulaic. I like watching rounds that are more to do with defaults and prodding out areas and the defenders are trying to figure out where on the map the attackers are. So that's my only real thought for like if the developers should have any active balancing towards or away from a certain playstyle. I think that if it got I mean, people enjoy things being fast-paced, but if it got too fast-paced to the point where you could just overwhelm any site by rushing into it, I think that would be a bad place for the game to be.
Yeah, I think as any game goes, I think you see ebb and flows of meta. My mind goes to CS because it's the easiest example in this regard. At least you'll see kind of super strategic approaches where it's incredibly drilled, incredibly set piece based. Let's look at Astralis as an example of that. And then their biggest counter they always struggled with, regardless of if they were a good team or not, was any French squad, because they played this very loose, puggy aim style that can dismantle a kind of set piece approaching team that plays maybe not to the meta, to their own standard. I mean, Astralis were always the better team. You could debate, I guess, but you'd be wrong, than any of the French teams that were currently, challenging them. But I assure you, all the times that Astralis randomly lost was to that. Because I remember speaking to the players about it at the time, and they're like, we play what's meant to be right, and they just still somehow shoot us, and it's ridiculous. I think we're seeing kind of the turn of events that happens in a lot of these games, and it was Mixwell at the end of one of the tournaments they won. I don't know if it was I think it was one of the recent ones. They just beat out the Fish 123 roster when they had Ardiis playing with Scream and Mixwell. And Mixwell said, well, right now we can play Puggy because people don't punish us. One, because the highest end level players right now are all aim gods. I mean, you've literally got in Europe like Scream and Mixwell who are phenomenal. I mean, they're literally nuts. Like, of course they can play to that strength. And even the most regimented team, let's say Fish 123 at the time, even though with on screen as a stand-in, they're playing a normal approach to the game. But are you going to be able to win your fight against Scream that you should do, even though you've put down all your utility correctly? They could do late in the round 20-second hits, and Scream's still going to bang 2 headies and he's in. So it's like, it's a big mismatch still. I think, one, skill disparity is a real thing towards the high end of these scenes and the teams out there currently when it comes to strategic approach and when it comes to kind of aim style and aim heavy approach. And honestly, I don't think we'll see a meta for a while. I think we've got, a composition favor that seems to work best on, a generic basis. And I'm glad to see teams experimenting, but I don't think we know the actual meta yet because this disparity between teams is too high. The amount of times I've seen Prodigy, aka that Mixwell squad, beating Fish 123, so easily, just walking through them, and then the Fish 123 smashing everyone else in a completely different play style. It's like, well, what level are we at here? Our Scream team really the best we're gonna see flat out in Europe right now? That's literally a puggy mix of like Swedish CS players and a couple of puggers. Is that it? I mean, I hope we don't see those kind of like just 5-man stack rush sites. I think the utility is there to slow them down and hinder them. I think also then you've got to look at what was the other team doing where they couldn't feel out a 5-man hit, and were they using their utility correctly? Were they, only soloing a site with Cypher? And right now Cypher has a lot of counters. As much as people think Raze is a counter to Sage, Raze is a huge counter to Cypher and any solo site player. So right now what I'm seeing is a lot of the skilled individuals being on Raze as well, like your Tens, like your, anyone who can like individually frag out, they'll pick up Sage or Raze. And it's like, pound for pound, the aim is going to probably win that out if they can dismantle the utility. So people have to get creative again. It's going to be that kind of changing factor. I don't think it's going to be this kind of 5-man hit site, just rush, go for it and hope for the best. I think that you have to look at the teams who can't handle that yet. And you might need to see teams switch the way they play the game, more, defensive aggression, pushing out for information, trying to, work on the extremities of the map. Again, I think it's too early to tell, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
This happens.
It's been good so far, though.
This happens with every new esports game, I think, that develops, though, is that you end up seeing when an esports scene develops, this kind of fast and loose individual play style. It's a little bit more apparent as well in a game like Valorant because an individual can really just hard carry, like you look at Tens from his performance, right? But as time goes on, I do believe, just on the very nature of this game having so many different abilities and pieces of utility that are so different to CS, that eventually you will see teams kind of learn. Sorry, excuse me, like saliva because I'm eating during a podcast. You'll learn.
Sexy.
You'll eventually learn how to play around each member of your team and their utility, and you'll have ways that you can instantly just react to something. You're like, okay, I'm going to use my breach stun on here on this corner. I want you to push onto it, and then I'm going to raise grenade the window. And then they push in time with each other, and then they can punish those players that do rely on just if they push through, I don't know, garage doors on Haven, I'm just going to shoot them. But the teams that really play around all their utility, you'll find that the tighter that those margins get, the less you'll be able to do it. And that happens as time goes on in an esports scene. Teams get more disciplined. Teams get a little bit more precise.
Yeah. Yeah,
cool.
I agree.
Glad
I think
we all
it's
agree.
in a good place as well. Like right now, it's really interesting. There's a blend of different styles all over the place. So it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I think for me, the big fun one, is seeing kind of the return of agents that people thought were mid-tier, kind of leaning towards S-tier again. Viper, for me, coming back in is great. I think she's great on Ascent and Split, for starters. It's free, easy walls. You get a lineup grenade, essentially, that just ticks on spikes. Same with Sova. I mean, I think it was, who was it? Wardell was playing it
He's and
he had so many set pieces, set lineups that are completely safe. You literally get the spike down in a certain area, he falls back to a safe area, and then just sits there and waits with the shock dart. I mean, and people have to realize that, oh, it's Sova left alive, we have to push because we're not going to win otherwise. And that's going to be the next evolution, is they have to be able to counter that spot that he's going to probably be sat in. But it adds a new layer. I think that's fun. It's definitely not Counter-Strike now, but we're seeing kind of the return of agents that did fall out of favor. And I think Sova was always a weird pick for me. I think when the option was Sova or Cypher in a composition, I would have always said Cypher, but now seeing how well suited offensively he's fitting into the meta, it's pretty good to see him back.
Yeah, I think Ascent helped a lot with the meta as well, because I think we've really seen that Ascent plays in such a different way compared to like Haven or Split, in that you have these like long sight lines and very like open side, not open sides, I mean, you know, there's a lot of corners, but you play it in a very different way. And I think we've seen in tournaments so far that it's a very diverse meta on Ascent specifically, because you can play in so many different ways. And similarly, I think people learn how to play those characters on Ascent, and then they bring that to the other maps as well. So I believe it really shook up the meta in a very nice way, and I'm looking forward to see if they can bring in Viper into more like Bind, etc.
All right, enough about the meta. Let's talk about the tournaments that are being ran and a couple of the announcements as well, because Riot have finally announced a little bit more information other than their basic esports plans, and that's the Ignition series they got announced. Pretty big news. I think it was in the last episode we all kind of agreed that, or at least this was the major point I was making. I don't know about you guys. I'm going to claim the clout for this one, I suppose. I said that they need to get more involved. They need to start injecting a bit more capital, working with some of these organizations to create something a little bit more solid than just these kind of open tournaments that are going around, where teams can just kind of throw around. And tournament structures are never really too ideal, but they finally come out with something concrete, and I believe 2 dates as well for some tournaments they're working with as well. But the basic idea is that Riot are now going to start to work with a lot of organizers to create tournaments and sort of make something a bit more official in almost every single region, which is pretty huge.
Yeah, that part of it is awesome. Like the fact that the second tournament to be officially backed is based in Japan is pretty sick. Like it indicates immediately, it sends a very clear message that they want this to be a global esport, because Japan is like the last place not the last place, you know, maybe that would be fucking, I don't know, Sri Lanka or something, but it's one of the last places that you would want to invest in your kind of FPS PC gaming scene. So the fact that they're willing to, you know, do that as their second title, I mean, they should have big things planned for the obvious regions of, you know, even some that don't get as much love elsewhere, like Brazil, for example, has got to be higher on their radar than Japan, and like Korea, China, these kind of regions have got to be higher than Japan as well. So the fact that they are immediately backing one of the Japanese events seems to indicate that they have aspirations for other shit. I just saw so many people disappointed by this announcement.
Really?
Captains.
Yeah, because the first tournament that Riot's ever put together is just captains who don't know who their fucking team's going to be until they'll go to sleep the night before and then wake up and be like, oh, let me just check my PC and find out who I'm playing the first ever Riot Valorant tournament with. Oh. That seems like a good idea.
I didn't realize that was how it worked.
G2, and how much was that Riot?
That was, I think, mostly G2, because now I don't know that for sure, but I saw what's his name, Carlos Ocelot, talking about the decision-making process behind it and saying, I think his justification was something like, oh, well, we haven't seen who the top players truly are yet, so he wanted it to be open. Like, come the fuck on. You want you want viewers, you want fucking big names to be your captains. Don't peddle this bullshit. Just make it an open tournament if you wanted it to be the best teams at the end.
Yeah,
there's no argument for this. It's a tired format. It didn't really work that well with Twitch Rivals. It didn't make it more entertaining. It made it less. I don't know. I not a big fan.
Yeah, no, I sort of agree with you as well, because we have some nice storylines coming out of the closed beta as well. But, you know, I do think that if we had more proper tournaments with established teams that wanted to play with each other, or like open tournaments, I feel like we'd be able to flesh out those narratives rather quickly at the start of this game and see who is coming out on top with no, you know, asterisks next to the name. And, you know, we could actually see some teams being established, because that's what we had in Overwatch for a long time. And I mean, when we came out with Overwatch in 2016, we had this whole Envy story where they were like undefeated for like It was some bizarre, like 30 or 50 like online matches.
No, it was
matches.
like 51 online matches in a row. Yeah,
and then I broke it. But there was like such a long period of time where they were so dominant that it created this incredible narrative about that team. But we haven't really been able to find those storylines yet. And I mean, part of that is, you know, artists leaving Fish 123 in Europe, etc. But, you know, not being able to really establish these storylines, I think hurt the scene a little bit, even though the viewership is nice.
What do you make of the EU tournaments then, the results that have been coming around with the Epulze groups that we've been played so far? We haven't seen the playoffs yet, but we've seen some individual groups of the EU team. The thing is, when we were discussing this podcast and the runner show and the things that we wanted to discuss, the EU scene, I feel a little bit just bamboozled by, because it feels like it's in flux a lot more than the NA scene is. The NA seems a little bit more settled regarding actual teams and investments and sponsors, but it is still quite puggy in EU.
I mean, yes and no. The big factor is, as much as I hate like invitationals, when I think Carlos put up a poll, and side note, I'm super excited to cast that invitational thing with the captains. Thank you for the opportunity. Carlos. Love that. Big moves, right? The sad fact is, as much as these teams are great, and I know a lot of them, 2-4GL, the Finns are old COD 4 players I've known for a very long time. They're very, very talented. Fish 123, obviously, I've known them for a decent amount of time now. Party Parrots, I've seen them in a couple of mixes.
Yeah.
Royals, I know them pretty well from CS. Who else is there? Valorando, or whatever they want to call themselves, is an old PUBG roster I know. You've got CS Boys and Dream Chasers. And these are the kind of teams in Europe that are considered the, I don't say lesser known teams, but the kind of, grinding teams, away from the invitationals. The fact is that sometimes the invitational teams beat them anyway. That's kind of how it is. I mean, the biggest problem is that literally Prodigies team, which is that Scream Mixwell roster I keep talking about, they are literally, I'd argue the best. I'd argue the best out there at the moment. So as much as I'd love to be able to kind of highlight the smaller scene, there is a couple of tournaments obviously highlighting them. They ain't as good as someone who's pretty recently walked away from Counter-Strike at the very top, if not tier 1, tier 2 part of the scene, right? It's like these guys are coming back in, or they're coming from a different game and they're trying to, apply their skills here. NIP could be a really good one to look at. The roster they picked up has played plenty of other games. I think they come from, where was it? Paladins, I think it is?
Yeah, Paladins. They're world champions.
And they're good. I've watched them play. They're really good. They have the right ideas. If you want to look at a team who plays Valorant the way a thinking man would like it, you know what I mean? With like the kind of ideas of how to approach the game, they play like that. Do they win the events? No. Does Mixwell just shove an Orm up their arse sometimes? Yes. So it's like, as much as I want to hype up that, I hate these invitationals, sadly, sometimes the teams that have kind of picked up with these, CS gods are still just kind of running through it. And until these teams, like the ones on your screen here, like as said, NIP, 2-4GL, Party Parrots, the Party Parrots were in the Twitch Rivals tournament recently. CIS roster beat, I think it was the Turkish team in the finals. Very good. The CIS team, just pure Russian, approach to the game. I mean, they're great, but they're still not beating out some of the big invites. So they need to catch up, and when they do, then it's game on. Then it's fun.
Yeah, the European scene seems like it's got, I don't know whether this seems weird to say, but like more talent, but not solidified into good teams properly yet. Like the American scene is basically 4. I mean, is it like 4? Maybe there's like 5 decent,
TSM, Cloud9,
decent
Gen
teams.
G, Immortals.
Is Cloud9 a decent team?
Yeah. Cloud9 won a tournament in the beta, and then they came in and they just looked fucking all over the place. But
is it even Cloud9 though?
Well,
it's
yeah,
still 10 friends,
it's
right?
10C and friends.
Yeah, but it's the same. Well, it's not the same 5 people actually. They subbed out who was it? Infinite, and they ran Vice instead in this recent tournament.
Yeah, I was confused who Vice was, if I'm honest. When I was casting, I was like, has he changed his name? Who, you know what I mean? Like these rosters are shuffling so much.
Yeah, I think it was a new guy. But yeah, I don't know. Cloud9 though, also in the game that we didn't get to see that was off stream, I went back and I looked at the results of it, and they played default comps again and they won. So it was super weird. Like the only stuff that they showed on stream was them relying on 10s to frag out, playing weird comps. And then I looked, because I was so confused at how they beat Gen G, because I thought that Gen G actually was like, when you were talking, Pansy, about a thinking man's team, like they seem to have more teamwork but less fragging power, Gen G. They seem pretty good. And they got boomed. They got beaten 2-0 by Cloud9 off stream.
You said that you think the the European scene has a lot of talent, Josh. Like, is there anyone in particular besides the usual suspects like Prodigy or Fish123?
I mean,
like, is there any outstanding?
But the thing with Prodigy is that they're not really a team. It's like an agency that allows people to pug together or some shit. Like, it's not really an organization. So the amount of people that have gone through Prodigy is a large number. It's more than just one roster. So I can see potential for a bunch of those players. I mean, especially the obvious suspects as well. I mean, Scream was recently playing with Fish123 as well. Yeah. And we'll get on to talking about Fish later, because what a fucking weird conversation that is. But watching Scream and Mixwell play is a delight. But then you've also got like the Dream Chaser guys, like Pansy was talking about previously, with a bunch of Swedish former CS people. They look pretty good. There's a bunch of talent on the teams that are in Europe, but it hasn't coalesced, I feel. Fabricant as well. They actually have a bunch of former Overwatch players. Latex and Leodeds were like tank players, actually, in Overwatch. Fucking main tank game is apparently not a real thing.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Finally. Thank you.
And they picked up Zipan from NIP. I think there's just going to be a lot of shuffling in Europe, because until you have organizations that lock rosters down, you can and should shuffle to try and find what works best for you. This process of natural selection where you just fuck teams around until you find something that works. Because the teams that have tried to solidify people, like NIP, I think, have actually only officially signed 2 of their roster or something, and their team has just been slowly sliding down as well. I don't know.
But it is a bit in a state of flux too, right? Because I think Yasin was not part of that Paladins team. Wasn't he like the Counter-Strike streamer from Sweden?
I think it's YZNB, or YZN. Yeah, he's mostly, honestly, the reason I knew him is because he's always done like the Twitch Rival stuff. I didn't know him as like a standalone player technically, and I didn't realize he'd actually joined to play with them otherwise. You know what I mean? So I guess he's actually, really committed to this. He played fantastic. He was probably one of the harder carries on that team when I watched him play.
He's one of the big fragging talents in Europe. Yasin's really got skill with the rifle. There's also started from CS, right, which has Existence and Happy and Maniac playing for the team. So that's definitely a team to watch out for as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know. Like, I always want to see the Finns do well. 24GL is a team that I'm excited for. I'd like to see them grind, because I know that they played as I think it's at least the core 4 for like almost 10 years. I mean, give or take, right? They've gone through COD 4 Pro Mod, Battalion. They played these kind of like smaller FPS games, and they've been damn good at it. So I'd like to see that translate here. And I'm sure that, again, they're a roster that should be able to stay as 5 and actually grind out, which a lot of these obviously aren't. They're just like, oh, is this ex-CS player wanting to join our roster? Sweet, let's pull him in for a bit and see if it works out. But yeah, we'll see.
I find it quite interesting that the way esports has been going over the last couple of years has been, at least from what I've seen with the games that get released, is that NA teams or NA orgs will poach players from Europe quite often, and almost entire teams from Europe, to represent them in the NA region and play there. It's generally considered, I mean, at least in Overwatch, I think that the EU talent is looked down upon, but early on in Overwatch, it was always, the EU scene was generally regarded, I think, as stronger than NA. Same in CS for the longest time. I don't know if that's still the case recently.
I'd say it's true,
yeah. But what I found interesting is COVID has put a stop to the kind of poaching that normally goes on. And what we've seen is that, especially recently, that kind of timeline where players will get poached has been sped up with more outside investment, with more sort of pressure from these investors to trying to get like a return and trying to actually build something. It's interesting that COVID has just kind of put a stop to it, because no one's going to get visas. You're not going to play a tournament on 120 ping from Europe. You're not really going to be able to pick up those players. So we're going to be in a weird scenario in potentially a couple of months' time, and we finally get to see like international LAN events where we
couple of months. You're optimistic, aren't you?
Couple of months.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah, couple of months.
Nah,
yeah, maybe if we all fly to Vietnam, then we can all play a LAN event for $86.
You don't think it might be a couple of months until a vaccine comes out, and then I don't know.
Yeah, possible.
Is that optimistic? I thought that was a pessimistic viewpoint, that we'd all be out of this in a couple of months.
Mate, a couple of months?
Yeah.
You think in August we're going to be going to LAN events?
No, not
You're off
August.
your
Not
rocker.
August. Sorry. When I say a couple of months, what I meant was like next year. I didn't mean August. But yeah, it's interesting to see it put a stop. Let's talk about the NA scene then and some of the tournaments. The NA scene for me is interesting to watch because the tournaments are happening quite often and no one really knows they're happening unless you're really looking for them. It's a bit difficult to kind of find out the results of them. There's a tournament going on as we speak right now. I think TSM are playing
have the
it
best teams,
currently. Yeah.
I think TSM is just, they're the only good team that was in it, right? So they were just kind of rolling everybody.
I don't know. Gen G might be in it.
Is that?
I don't know.
Are they?
I mean, check,
I think they are.
Check the...
No, there's also, it's got China Win, who are maybe like the best amateur team in North America, but
There's
apart
a
from
player
that...
called Cute Fat Boy, so it's honestly my favorite thing that I've never been able to like cast.
Do you remember playing against Cute Fat Boy, Bren? We played against
I
him
remember
a
you
bunch
getting
of times
very angry at Cute Fat Boy.
I got so angry at him because the name's just so cute. Like, it's so bothering to get killed by Cute Fat Boy repeatedly.
Yeah. That's like next level psychological warfare. In my games, I like to, if I know somebody's tilted and they say something in all chat in a match, I'll do whatever I can in my power to tilt them further and enact like psychological warfare. But that's next level is making your alias Cute Fat Boy just to really piss somebody off. Imagine, I mean, you were just getting dominated. So I have to imagine you can relive that.
You know, for Overwatch, that's why Cool Matt had his name, Cool Matt 69. He deliberately made the name so that people would get mad when he killed them. Because it was like the name that a 12-year-old would pick. Like, haha, sex number, I'm really cool. My name's Cool Matt 69.
Yeah, it was the same with Too Good as well. He just
Really?
wanted to frag people. Yeah, and he wanted to be like, this guy is too good, you know, like it's kind of bad as well.
Oh,
you know? So
it's kind of basic these days though, if you think about it. The name Too Good.
Yeah, but he's an old man now.
He is an old man. Yeah, he's from a bygone era. Anyway, let's talk about these NA teams.
Hey, he brought us my dong. So you
do we still think? Because I was actually quite surprised with the Immortals First Light that everyone predicted TSM to win it, the entire thing.
I was a bit surprised about that actually as well, especially considering that TSM had just lost to a couple of amateur teams in the Pittsburgh night tournament. And then they also, I mean, in the beta, they lost to Cloud9 and then before they were picked up for TSM. And then they had like a close game against Gen G. I don't know. I didn't feel like they were the massive favorites that everyone thought they were, but they fucking ruined in the tournament. So I guess they were right.
Yeah, they did do pretty well. I mean, the closest game was the Immortals match. I think,
it was, yeah.
Between them. I mean, that was the only one that went really the distance. I, for some reason, predicted Immortals to win this event. Maybe it was just the Immortals first light in the name.
Immortals?
I didn't predict them. I thought that people were sleeping on them a little bit. Because from what we've seen of this squad, I don't know if I've just been listening to Pack-10 too much. I don't know. But Pack-10, the coach for Immortals, or one of the coaches, one of the people who put this squad together, was convinced that when he was speaking to management, he was like, okay, I think we said this last episode, but he said to management, give us 2 months with this team and we'll make them like a top contender. And they've just been improving so rapidly that with every single tournament that we watch, I feel like with Immortals, they do just get better and better and better and seem ever so closer to taking away this mantle that TSM might be the best team in NA. But this kind of evolution of the NA scene is happening so quickly that if you blink for a moment, you're just going to miss it because we went from the narratives that, we've got T1, who we haven't seen for a long time. Gen G.
T1 could still be the best team as well, by the way. Like they just haven't played in a while.
You're saying that after the Twitch Rivals event where they almost lost to Myth and Friends.
Well, yeah, I know, but like they could be.
That's TSM with Myth, though, right?
It was TSM with Myth, yeah.
And Myth was actually
did they leave
kind
out?
of decent.
Myth is fine.
They left out Hazed, right?
Yeah, they left out Hazed.
I think so.
Yeah, and Hazed is not a fragger. Like TSM is Wardell and Sabrosa with drones sometimes fragging as well. So
the players that are 22 years of age, as opposed to the 31-year-olds.
What did you call TSM?
I said TSM was a retirement home with Wardell managing them. It's what it feels like sometimes, but it's obviously not that apt because there are some younger players. But yeah, Sabrosa and Wardell, it feels like I take issue with TSM when I watch them because it does feel like if Wardell doesn't get a pick early on, like they suck at pistol rounds because Wardell doesn't have an op in the pistol round.
So what?
It feels
that gives you 2 rounds. That doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Pistol rounds are so
exactly.
irrelevant in this game. The economy is so weak Like it's so unpunishing. It's such a shit word for it, but I'll go for it for now. I mean, the point is that economy doesn't actually make that much of a difference. Wardell knows how to play to be able to give himself an operator every single fucking round, it seems. And honestly, you drop one pistol, you have the better buy in the third anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it literally doesn't matter. I cast the game against Immortals. Immortals probably played the better game of Valorant, and they still got dumpster babied by Wardell running around with an operator.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to approach that, if you don't know how to get past a double op setup, then that's your own fault. You know what I mean? And someone like Wardell should get away with it until people punish him. You know, and then you've got to hope that the backbone of that team, which is everyone else, can just play a normal game of basically Counter-Strike at that point. You know what I mean? Like, they're fine.
I'm not convinced, though, that TSM is going to be able to... I don't know. It seems weird to me because I keep talking myself in circles with this, because I do think that TSM is definitely a fragging team. Like that is the thing that is carrying them at the moment, is the fact that Wardell's such a beast AWPer, and actually Sabrosa might even be the like low-key best player on this team because of the fact that he can pick up that double AWP and be really nasty on another part of the map, and then his rifle and his pistol is just unbelievable as well. But the thing that I keep talking myself in circles with is whether TSM have a better chance of improving tactically and kind of staying ahead of the rest of the pack, or the other teams have a chance of being able to overtake them by improving their already decent tactics to the point where they can just overcome Wardell and Sabrosa. Like, I think it comes down to whether you believe.
Then? Like, who's the team that should be able to do that?
I mean, hopefully it would be T1, but I don't think the T1 are a strategic team either from what we've seen so far. But we haven't really seen them with their full five outside of Twitch Rivals, which, you know, we don't have the sample data for that. But I think that Gen G and Immortals, Gen G and Immortals are both more tactically sound teams, I think, than TSM, but they lack the fragging power. And Immortals finished third. They actually beat Gen G. But I put out a tweet being like, wow, I can't believe that Gen G got ass blasted off stream. and I had one of their staff get in touch with me and DM me and be like, by the way, Mikhail's gone to the hospital. So that's the reason why.
Was that Arnold?
No, it wasn't. But it was somebody else that was working for Gen G. So yeah, they wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Mikhail was ill. So maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I just real quick, watching the skill disparity between Immortals and Team Solar Mid in the game I cast was actually pretty huge. They did go OT in one game, but I mean, honestly, TSM were running through them. And if you're going to face off against TSM, and if a bunch of analysts and commentators from either Overwatch or Counter-Strike can realize that Wardell is the problem you're going to face, how the fuck didn't they work that out? You know what I mean? Like real talk, we shouldn't be the fucking 10 heads about this. Like, if Immortals are meant to be the team to jump, you can't walk into a TSM game and be surprised when you get treated like that. You have to be able to calm that down instantly. You have to be able to either play out default, sit deep on site, get ready to do site hits over and over again in the most boring potential fashion. I couldn't think of a single thing wrong technically that Immortals did. Technically, they were fine. But they just got absolutely blasted by Wardell running around. If you're not going to be able to work that out, that's on you, right? It's like, and again, I mean, as you said, I would, and you know, that pickup of Skadoodle over Hiko makes me worry that we're never going to see T1 having the strategic backbone of a strong IGL. They're all a very quiet team, and when it comes to like a vocal
you don't
voice.
Think Skadoodle is like good enough of an IGL? I know he picked it up more like after he took a break and now into Valorant, but I don't know how good he is of an IGL.
Compared to Hiko, no. But will you get more out of Skadoodle power-wise? Sure. I'd say if they wanted a good IGL, which that team needed. For me personally, I wish they'd picked up Hiko, but I knew they'd have picked up Skadoodle anyway. So it's like, I think they're going to lack an overarching voice of experience. Even though Skadoodle is great, this is no discredit to Skadoodle or anyone on that team. They just don't have someone who naturally fulfills that role. So I'll be interested to see who does push to that #1 spot, because I think it'll define the meta in NA.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how Skadoodle performs with T1, because I do think that, you know, like I agree with all of you. I think it's probably one of the most interesting teams in the NA scene. But I wanted to add to Immortals as well that I think one of the reasons we want to see Immortals do so well, or at least I want to see them do well, is because they bring this analytical approach to Valorant. And I think this is what a lot of people expected about the competitive Valorant scene, is we would see so many good executes and analytical play, etc. And I mean, like Josh mentioned, we know Packing 10 and Gunba so well from Overwatch and what kind of coaching style they sort of bring to the table. And so I think we want to see Immortals do well because they approach the game in a different way from maybe some of these Counter-Strike players, and maybe they can take that approach and push the game to the next level. That being said, though, I do very much think it's an attitude question. So I don't want to count TSM out because I know that they're on top right now with T1 not playing a lot of tournaments, but I could very much just see them continue to dominate, the way they're playing right now.
I have a different read of the match. Not a different read per se, but from the TSM Immortals game that we watched. Watching that just screamed to me as the games progressed in each map, screamed to me that Immortals were losing their heads a little bit, I think. In terms of their discipline and how well they were working together. It's the one thing that you need to not lose is that kind of discipline when you're playing against a team like TSM, because like we've already made so evident, Wardell is just going to dismantle you, and so is Sabrosa. That was my take on it, at least when I was watching it, because it seemed like they had the pieces necessary early on. The early rounds, almost the first half or the first quarter of each map, seemed like it was quite back and forth, quite even, with Immortals taking a slight edge, but the more that the money started to work and Wardell was picking up the op almost every round, and the more they started to lose those rounds just purely off the back of Wardell or Sabrosa getting some opening pickoffs for them, the more they seem to sort of crumble. But I think this will fade away with time. This is why I'm pretty confident that Immortals will eventually overtake these more kind of pubby teams if TSM don't shape up themselves in terms of playing more towards the strategic side of Valorant. I think Immortals will eventually overtake them as long as they get over this kind of nerves, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to say nerves because we have no way to tell what they were thinking in the game. But watching them, that's how I felt personally.
The thing for me, though, is like the next step to that is TSM don't have to play a normal style until someone makes them, right? Like for them, this is just like, if you think of it like an onion, right? So until someone like Immortals can punish them for the super aggressive peaks, the super aggressive defensive side, pushing up everywhere, taking map control, which you should be doing. Let's say a T side should be defaulting and then leading a site hit, going through the checkboxes, which TSM know how to do. They're all CS players. They know how to play a default round out if they have to. They're playing this like they have someone like Kenny S on their team who can just, or JW in his prime, who can bound around, get a pick, and then just back off from it. Until you punish that, why would they ever have to change? And then you've got to hope that TSM doesn't have that second look, which I'm almost certain they're going to have. They know how to play a basic round. They know how to play patient on sites. They know how to play their agents. I think TSM's going to be a bigger problem. If they're able to keep that confidence up against someone who can match that sort of picking style, like T1, like you probably won't get away with that against Skadoodle or Brax. But again, so it's like if they can apply that mentality of just sheer confidence, running at you, being hyper aggressive, then falling away, costing you rotation time, costing you map control, and map knowledge of where people are. If they can apply that across the board, they're going to be a nutty team until someone completely quenches that, until someone completely locks that down. And again, they might face T1 shit the bed and not be able to do it. So what does it matter? That was a one-off tournament, right?
Well, what do we think of T1 then? Because I thought this was generally the consensus, but I'm not that hot on T1 as a team, personally. Just watching them play, we haven't seen much of them. I think the last time we saw them play, what was the Twitch Rivals tournament?
Yeah, that was it. And the competition was, the
competition was lacking,
teams,
right? Yeah, exactly. But I didn't think too much of them personally. Just that's my impression of them currently until we see them in a tournament since then. Do people think this, or are we under the impression that they're one of the true contenders for the top spot with TSM?
I think you have to assume, I think, that they are going to be up there with the others because we've seen them perform at like an okay level. Even before they added Scar to the roster, they finished, second, I think, behind Gen G in their like T1 Nerd Street Gamers Invitational thing. So we know that, they finished second in that. And they had, that was with Skadoodle. It was with Elige instead of Food. We just didn't know that Skadoodle was going to be on the roster at that point. So I think that this is a team that the raw power and the name value of their roster, which isn't my favorite way of building teams. And I think that those kind of teams are going to drop off faster than any others. But just early on in the game, if you've got a team that has Brax and Skadoodle and ACK on it, you should be gunning for the top spot. And if you're not, then I think you've made some serious mistakes. If you've already been having reasonable success in tournaments, like what any tournament they enter, they should be maybe not a favorite because we haven't seen them, but they should be ahead of every other team that isn't in that top four.
Yeah, you'd expect them to be in semis at least,
Yeah. Like if they aren't making semifinals of any tournament that they've been invited to, then that's a major failure for them, I think.
On the other side of that, let's talk about a team. I've been wanting to talk about this team for a while, actually. The last 2 episodes we've done, but we've not got onto the individual team aspect. Sentinels.
Oh my God.
There's nothing to talk about, Bren.
What a tragedy, though, that Sentinels is. Like, what a tragic team. I watched them play, and it's like they're stuck in 2015 or something.
This was a whole month ago. The last time they played
a long time ago.
Was literally in like the beta. It was the 17th of May. But the reason I think that we want to talk about this is because it has Overwatch players on it, right? And so much was made of this Sinatra going over to this roster, and they have Zombs over there as well, pairing alongside Shazam and Six. So it's like a blend of CS talent and Overwatch talent. And they have not been performing well.
Yeah,
and when you look at the VODs, it's just 5 people following each other into a choke point. Mate,
it's tragic.
It is a lack of...
But
there's no defaults. There's no map control.
This is why I think the Sentinels have turned down a lot of the invitations, like the Immortals First Light invitation. And
do you know that they turned them down, or are you just pulling that out of your ass? Were they invited?
Why wouldn't they have been?
I don't know, because they're not good, because they haven't had good results at tournaments.
I mean,
you can't just say that they turned down an invite.
When you're trying to make a tournament, Josh, you earn that money back through viewership, right? I mean, it would make sense that you want to invite the biggest names, and Sentinels is one of the teams with the biggest names. I think.
Okay.
I'm just going off the assumption that they did invite them, because it's a little bit in my primate brain. It's a little bit ludicrous not to assume that they weren't invited, because it just makes sense. But I have a little internal conspiracy theory that some of these teams that have been turning down these events aren't quite getting the results that they want in scrims, and they're not up to scratch. Teams like T1 that struggled against TSM with Myth in Twitch Rivals, teams like Sentinels, which really struggled, even in the beta. I think they're waiting until they get some more respectable results. But eventually, there's going to come a tournament that rolls around. Actually, will there even be? I don't know what I'm saying here. Will there be a tournament? Do you think there's going to be a tournament that is going to be over 100k prize pool online? I don't think so, right? There's no way in hell that they would run something like that.
Where do you go with this, Brent?
I don't know. I'm jumping all over the topics.
Yeah.
What's your end goal here? You think that there's at some point going to be a tournament that's so big that these teams have to show up and then they flop? Is that
potentially?
The way? But they'll just play open tournaments. A lot of these tournaments, I think, are going to just.
But
be
they haven't, though. And
they haven't been playing. They've been remaining
why
hidden.
haven't Sentinels been playing more?
Well, there have been a lot of invitationals.
All right.
I mean,
and it could just be because they're shit.
I'm going to be honest. I mean, they've been.
Tell it how it is, Pansy.
No, I mean, they lost to it was MSPAS at the time, which turned into TSM. So that was the last thing we saw from them, I think. That was when was that? I just can't remember. I mean, they've lost out to respectable people, but the fashion in which they lose in these tournaments does not give you hope. The first time of another good team, they don't make it to, 8+ rounds, 10+ rounds. And during the early stages, Shazam was, one of the players that everyone was watching as well, let alone obviously having one of arguably the better Overwatch players coming into this roster and obviously causing that big, frenzy around it. But yeah, Shazam was really solid throughout it. And I mean, how do you make a roster like that work, though? You've got no idea how these people play in a team. You have no idea about your teammates. You played a couple of pugs. Sure, this got thrown together off the back of, hey, let's pick up Sinatra because he's absolutely nutty. And I assume there's only so many teams he could go to potentially, unless there's some sort of contract clash coming out.
No, he had that as well. Coming from San Francisco Shock, there were only so many teams he could go to.
Did he though? Because that was reported that was the case, and then he denied it. So I don't know what the reality of that situation is. Jacob Wolf's normally correct, but
yeah, again, it is pinch of salt with that. But the point is, it's like that roster got thrown together kind of at the same time as I guess you're looking at like T1 side, locking the roster. It looks fine on paper, but not when you consider how much people are again discussing that these players got signed for. Is that worth the value right now? No, but potentially to resell down the line, maybe. I don't know. It's been a flop until we see them. As I said, I think top 3 is reasonable to look at for them. When they're getting beaten out, eventually, I think, what was it? The one where they lost to MSPAS, now TSM, they were where did they finish in total in that? They were 7th to 8th position, got beaten out by High Grounds. Honestly, for NA, the team I want to be looking at to do well that isn't as much on the radar as High Ground. They're the PUBG team that everyone they are getting so much shit for not being a CS team or, you know, an Overwatch player or, you know, some caliber that is deemed to be okay to the FPS, you know, fan base. But I mean, they're
from PUBG or
PUBG team.
Oh yeah, PUBG.
PUBG team. Pretty much all of them played for, I think it was Tempo Storm, if I'm not mistaken, over in NA. They did great, but they were young guns, and they've been grinding hard. I mean, at the end of PUBG, they left PUBG basically, still playing in the leagues, but didn't bother playing pracs. Went over, grinded, face it, got to like the highest rank they could, getting ready for Valorant, and then just switched. And I mean, in the private invite channels, they've been doing pretty well in all their scrims. They've been beating out most of these kind of like, you know, being bought up for 20k rosters sort of deals. And to be fair, they're struggling to find an org because people aren't expecting a team that's not comprised of ex-CS players being any good. So it's like, I think they're the team to look out for because they have a lot more to grind for if you exclude, like, I guess, like Brax with the old storyline of, you know, he's finally able to play, he has been released. They're hungry, right? They've got a lot to prove, which would be interesting. Whereas obviously some of these other teams have already I don't want to say peaked, but they've hit, you know, good high markers in CS, in quote unquote respectable games, you know, very well fleshed out esports scenes. So it'd be interesting to see if these guys come up and do well for themselves. But yeah, the NA scene is a weird one. It's like, yes, you've got probably the highest looked at teams as such, right? You get these kind of big names, but will they be any good like 3 months down the line? I don't know, because they picked it up around streamers, right? It was like, who's the big names, who's the influencers, who's pulling viewers?
The clout teams. I'm worried about the clout retention rate as well. I want to TM that as well. The clout retention rate, if you start losing tournaments or not entering tournaments, you start to lose it very fast. I have some kind of sick interest. I feel like almost a mirror. When I look in the mirror now, I see what Monty feels about the Overwatch League, because I look at Sinatra and I have been refreshing his Sully Gnome account occasionally because I have this concern for Sinatra. It's not that I want to be proven correct. I would love to be proven wrong, but I have this concern that because the Sentinels picked Sinatra up so early and have just created a team that has not looked like it has much potential. People were always saying, right, okay, if Sinatra goes over to Valorant, that's fine, because even if he doesn't pop off, he'll still be a good streamer because he's got that streaming base. He had all of those stream viewers, and he's a really good player. But a lot of the people who peak early in an esport like this, if they don't manage to keep relevancy within the competitive side of it, they can drop off pretty fucking quickly. And so I've been kind of taking a look at his the viewership of his stream as well, and it has been dipping. Like when he was first getting announced, he was getting like 2,000, 3,000 kind of peak viewers on his streams. And now he's at a place where he's getting somewhere between 1,000 and like 2,500, something like that. And I'm concerned that if either the Sentinels don't continue to enter tournaments, or they do and they're just shit, that it takes a lot of these like clout teams and it just fucking nosedives them, and they don't even have the clout itself anymore.
Well, so really, they should have gone the Cloud9 approach. That's what I wanted Sentinel to do anyway, where it's like, hey, we're signing Sinatra, this is the big deal, and we're going to play with him. And they compete in all of these different tournaments, and then they can shape the team around him. But this Sentinel squad feels so official that now the expectation is on all of those players to perform. Whereas for Cloud9, you're like, well, okay, Tense is a fragger, he's fucking insane, we love this guy. And then if someone's shit, they can just boot him off and be like, well, you know, trial is over. Sorry. For Sentinels,
see you later, Shinobi.
Really,
peace.
Yeah. Sentinels, you can't really do that. Whereas I think we have a lot of questions about the surrounding players of Sinatra. I think Sinatra is a great player in Valorant, and I think he has a good future ahead of him. But I don't think he necessarily have the support system in this Sentinel squad to really continue to enable him. And if they're not playing in tournaments because this team isn't good enough, I mean, that's where you messed up. That's where you shouldn't have signed all of these players to deals, you know, this early in the eco space. And I'm kind of disappointing, because I just want to see Sinatra frag, and I know he can frag, but if the team around him isn't good enough, then, you know, that's going to hurt him as well.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room then. The one thing that we've been waiting to dive onto, the Ardiis accusations that have come about. Can we just run through the Fish 123 story for starters as well, because we've never gone through their kind of
the reason that people are even paying attention to them. That I think I gave Kurt this like tweet from Sliggy, who's he's probably the best observer in CS. I mean, am I wrong in saying that? I feel like he's incredibly well respected.
He's part of the band that is all as diligent as each other. They are the ones that you want to hire if you don't want your tournament to be shit.
And he's the coach of Fish 123, and this is what this team was able to accomplish in the beta. He made that like this wonderful infographic, which I loved. They were #1 worldwide in team earnings, despite the fact that there was bigger tournaments, although more regular tournaments happened in Europe, but bigger tournaments I think in North America. They had never lost a best of 3. All of this kind of shit, like unbelievable stuff. And so I went back and I watched a ton of VODs of them, and they have some amazing players. I mean, Ardiis is their primary AWPer, and he just shits on people. Soulcast is their Raze player who like plays on the other side of the map normally and like clears areas on his own. And he's so good. Was like, I think probably the best Raze at figuring out early on these amazing boombot angles and being able to clear ciphers and put a lot of pressure on them around the map. And then since launch, this team has just, I mean, they haven't been the same team. They are literally just not the same team. They played Twitch Rivals without Ardiis, and then, Ardiis officially left. And they've just not looked the same at all since. Even when they played with Scream, they just, the team lost to Hip Hip Hip. That's the first best of 3 that this team has lost. I mean, can you call them still the team? I mean, maybe not without Ardiis, but yeah. It's so weird, though, because they were hands down the best team in Europe, and probably the world when you consider beta, like the way that they were playing. I don't think that's too much of a stretch to argue, even though like Prodigy was running them pretty close. They hadn't lost a best of 3 to them. And then in the actual launch, this team, when you watch them, it just looks so different. Like they lost the magic immediately.
Yeah, they played a style that I loved when we were watching them. It was like the Puggy style, but I loved it because they're playing this high tempo style, often with Raze and Jett. Just the aim of it, playing a good style of game, but they had confidence that they were going to just win the aim duel straight up on various sections of the map. I think back to like how they would execute Haven on attack, for example. Like sometimes they just send Soulcast just down A long by himself, just expecting him to get a pick or something. And I think when you remove some of this firepower with Ardiis being gone, Ice Paper Hands Ardiis, him being so mechanically skilled and potentially being one of the best oppers in the world removed a lot when this team gone, and that's a significant cornerstone for the team of what they based a lot of their play off of. So of course it's not going to be the same team now.
I do think that if you want to replace a player, you just want to pick up another fragger, right? Like you look at the rest of the roster, you've got IGLs, you've got kind of your flex pick kind of players. So obviously like Soulcast is your flex pick, Link kind of being your Sage main, which is what you want, your IGL of Epulze. I mean, these guys are the solid ones. I'd rather lose out on a standalone Oppa than potentially, my IGL that's pretty good. Yeah. And again, the UK scene is perpetually unstable. I think the big deal for me was it was a UK team that seemed to like each other, that seemed to didn't have drama. I'm sure there's another topic we can follow up with. But the point is, that was the big deal. It wasn't that they were good at the game. There were plenty of people good at the game. They did well, of course, but they weren't infallible. They were fine, and I liked the approach. They were keen. like Sliggy was sweating on servers, finding these lineups. I mean, the guy was like working hard. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who knew more than Sliggy, who then put that to Soulcast, who then kind of applied it in game. So for me, it was like, they're a great team, good squad. They seemed keen. They had like a goal, right? But yeah, I mean, everything else has kind of been marred now. There's this tarnish across all of it. But again, yes, watching Ardiis play, he was phenomenal within that squad. But could you pick up just a fragger again that you just literally say, go out and do your thing. Here's your op. We'll get you on it financially. Don't shit the bed. Maybe. It's easier to replace than everything else.
They were kind of doing that with Scream, though, but he was forcing Reyna a lot. So I'm questioning, were they comfortable playing with Reyna in their lineup? Because, it's a bit of a pub stomper hero, and Scream got the job done. Like, he did get a ton of frags.
Scream was fragging, yeah.
Yeah,
but Scream's primarily a rifler, which I think changes up the whole kind of course of your game flow as well. I don't really think that it comes down to hero compositions either, because most of the time Ardiis was just playing Jett in order to get himself in the best AWP positions. You know, like how we see all of the AWP players just picking up the Jett and using it to play these hyper aggressive angles. Like sometimes, you know, Wardell's on the Sova instead, but generally speaking, Jett is so good at being able to get that pick and then just disengage. But I don't know. This team just didn't seem to. I don't know. And every conversation you have about it now is going to be, you're going to have to ask yourself the question, well, was Ardiis legit? Is this a situation where they looked better because they just had a guy cheating on their team? Oh, fucking impossible to know, isn't it? I mean, I think you have to start off with the person accusing him, because when you hide, I say hide, but yeah, I think hide is a fair word. When you hide behind the Twitter account name of like the police department or something, it's just one dude that's been around in Overwatch for a while who likes to out people who've been accused of cheating, and it's not always the best reporting in the world. It's not the best reporting in the world. It's just baseless accusations some of the time. But there is some evidence that's also been provided. There's like, clearly the voice is Ardiis talking about contemplating match fixing. And there's some apparent logs of him talking to cheat developers.
I think just talking about match fixing, though, the thing that people on the internet seem to have forgotten is that an accusation like this will hurt somebody's career. And it would suck so much if Ardiis was like, again, just a moment of weakness, as all humans have, having the discussion but never actually doing it, and then him just ruining whatever opportunities come up for himself based off of this would blow, because he is genuinely one of the most talented players that we've come across. And I think the cheating accusations as well are a little bit shaky as well. It's just what is it? The private logs between a cheat developer saying that he was considering radar cheating or was radar cheating.
Yeah, something like that. I don't think that. I mean, I know that CS as a game is very. There have been accusations of cheating at the highest level before in the past, and it's a game that if you even use the slightest, most subtle cheats, you could get an enormous advantage over your opponents. Whereas in a game like Overwatch that we come from, you'd have to be fucking going wild with hacks in order to get a massive advantage. Like, wall hacks just wouldn't be as anywhere near as useful. They would not be game changing in the sense of like small wall hacks, like, you know, these aim adjustment things that show you which direction a player is in. Whereas it's so difficult to be able to say with pure confidence that nobody at the elite level could possibly be cheating, especially in a game where all of the matches are happening online. Vanguard has already had its problems. They've had to roll back certain measures with Vanguard because they've been far too intrusive with the client itself, and it's brand new, and we've already seen that cheats can happen. So it's hard to have confidence either way, really.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just want Riot to investigate this, so we'd know one way or another. That's it. I mean, the problem is, like, you look, the irony being that this is the biggest redemption arc for one of the players who got basically his career ruined by match fixing, in the form of Brax, obviously coming back in. Valorant's his second shot at being, you know, a true competitor again, you know, with a clean slate. And now the first thing we see about one of the most up and coming teams, you know, this big talent, you know, the one to watch. Well, you know, here it is again, right? It's like, and I think that seeing what happened to Brax when obviously it was proven to be true, I don't want to sit here and second guess and go, well, maybe. I mean, the guy was phenomenal to watch. So it's like, if it turns out, he was cheating, or he was match fixing, get him out. There's no, you know, that's it. I mean, you know, keep him out of the scene as long enough to ensure that he cannot be a competitive player for a good amount of time. But it just sucks already that, of course it's the UK team. Of course it is. Why couldn't it be anybody else? You know, like, why does it have to be the absolute fucking Brexit boys sitting here just dribbling away? Like, can we please just not be idiots once? Like, I genuinely hope for the sake of the scene it's not true, right? Obviously, for the sake of the player, it's not true, and this is just some baseless bullshit. Problem is, will everyone doubt him until he goes to LAN? Yep. Even if he plays average at LAN, will he still be accused? Yep. You know, it's like, you know, this is a big thing for the reputation. So I think take it away from the public's hands is the best thing, and say, Riot, please just fix this one way or another, and just look into it the best you can, and do what you can to either clear the man's name or to get it gone, because it's gonna absolutely fuck over the competition early on if this is already happening. You know what I mean? It's like, no.
Yeah, and I think that Riot, if they do find any evidence that there has been match fixing, and that's the other thing as well, I think that he says in his tweet longer that there was a team in Europe that he knew of that was match fixing, and he was talking about those guys, which I can't remember the name of them. It was like Valoralytics or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like if Riot does find evidence of that, you need to clamp down on it mega hard early on, because you can already see that even if Ardiis didn't, that the idea of this has already penetrated from the low-level CS side. And so you need to make sure that doesn't become pervasive within your tier 2 scene before it ever begins. So I think that even for the people that hated the idea of Brax being just permabanned from all events and this kind of stuff because, there's no chance for redemption, I feel like you would be justified for a very harsh punishment early on in the Valorant scene, because you need to root that kind of stuff out right at its start, right at the core.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a permaban probably, from Valorant.
Yeah, I mean, I would approve of that as well, as long as the evidence was there and it was substantial enough.
Yeah.
The way you avoid any of this, even I completely agree with you all. It needs to be Riot that interjects and investigates into all of this and shuts it down if it is the case, and shuts it down hard. But the Ignition series, it comes back to this argument of essentially supporting the scene in the first place, so that people, for whatever reason, don't have to rely on match fixing to make a career out of being a pro player, and having that sort of support structure in place from the base level. And I hope it does go further with the Ignition series. It seems like Riot have the right idea with it. So hopefully with an actual nice support structure with that teams can go into, and then they can earn money if they're good enough, this is not even a conversation that will occur again. But I know somehow it will with the UK scene.
Yeah, I mean, of course it will. Not even the UK scene, it just will happen. Like, this is the kind of stuff that will inevitably crop up within a game like this, especially when you consider that we're going to be stuck in online games for quite a long period of time. Nobody knows exactly how long, but within the Europe and North America, it seems like we're going to be playing online for quite a while, because LANs are just going to be not
unless we fly to Vietnam.
In the benefit of public health. Unless we fly to Vietnam.
It's like the scenes already, like, I mean, Emilio's banned, I think, still from competing in CS tournaments, I'm pretty sure, and he's playing currently with that Devil Walk roster. I mean, like, I don't know, like, online games and this kind of like sense of unknowing, I absolutely hate. I mean, the biggest downfall of integrity is obviously cheating and match fixing, and it's the pillar of what makes us be able to enjoy a game, is knowing that they're doing it all legit, right? So it's like, if there's any doubt of that, if it's anything like, it winds me up. It's like the entirety of that Fish 1-2-3's like initial run, the big storyline, the potential of that's the best European team now is completely marred because of this. So it's really disappointing.
Yeah,
and I mean, even in this allegation, it was like that he was going to be picked up for G2. Right. I don't know whether that's still going to happen. Like, if you're G2, what do you do in this situation, right? Like, you have found a player that's the best AWPer in Europe, frags unbelievably hard, looks like a fantastic prospect to sign along with Mixwell, who was their first player that they announced. And now you're in a position where are you gonna kind of bow to the public accusations, or give the guy a chance and risk a massive hit to your PR? It's a super tough position to be in for even the organizations involved.
Because that was the rumors, right? That he was going to join G2. The rumor, I mean, honestly, if even just the dregs of Prodigies comes together to join G2 with Mixwell, Ardiis, and they get Scream involved, this team could be absolutely
bonkers.
Picante. It is unreal. Because right now they've only announced Mixwell, but it seems like if you follow the kind of trend, that they may just be going with the rest of the Prodigies to join this squad, or some of the players at least of it.
I mean,
it would almost be too much firepower.
Twitch, was it Twitch Rivals they played together? Ardiis played.
Yeah, where Ardiis played.
Yeah. It's like
it was unreal. It was crazy.
Yeah, because you had the perfect operator balance. I remember speaking to Mixwell after an interview, and I mean, Mixwell, if you ask most of the European players, they'll pick between Ardiis and Mixwell as the tier 1 operator players, depending on which style annoys them more. Do you want your kind of more passive, more solid, just operator that will always deliver you the frag, that will do just the right thing in the form of Mixwell? Or do you want your flashy, out there aggressive AWPer taking every single fight possible in Ardiis? I mean,
yeah.
And the concept of those two being on a team together, being able to kind of create this really nice combination, put hours in to work it out together. The synergy was great. He was almost IGLing against, what at the time was his current team, if not ex-team. It was brilliant to watch. So as said, I don't envy G2's position if they are now in process of, well, we were going to pick this guy up, and do we wait for Riot's confirmation now? Do we have to just sit here on this? And what do we do?
Yeah, it's fucked as well, because I feel like the most likely scenario is that the cheating shit is probably untrue, but the match fixing thing was something that he was probably heavily considering and probably has done in the past. Like, if I had to guess, just judging by the UK scene and by the fact that he has, by his own admission, actively considered match fixing in the past, if you're going to admit to having thought about something, it probably did not end there, but who knows? You got to give him the benefit of the doubt until evidence comes to light. But even in that instance, I mean, I feel like with a new case that comes to light and somebody that hasn't served any punishment, people are going to feel about that far worse than they do about somebody like Brax, who has already served the punishment for it. But the facts of the matter wouldn't be any different. Like, if Ardiis actually had match fixed in CS and not been caught for it, it would be kind of weird for Riot to have some kind of punishment for that in another previous game. So you get into some really weird territory with this kind of stuff, where if a new thing came to light right now as a current Valorant pro, but it was in a former game, like, you're kind of obliged not to punish them because it was somebody else's game. But you have got to keep a very watchful eye on them.
Yeah, because then you'd imagine maybe third parties might ban. Let's say a player was playing on, face it, ESEA, ESL, whichever league, cup, game. They ban them. Everyone else follows suit, obviously. Okay, maybe you can play in majors from Riot, but you can't play in 90% of the online tournaments. So how useful are you to a team? Because it's kind of the inverse with, I think, Counter-Strike and Steel and people like that, and Brax. They could play all the third-party tournaments, but when it ever came to a major, minor, any of the big things, no. Valve says no. So it's like, how much are you going to just hinder your career? Just how fucking stupid do you have to even be to consider that? You know what I mean? Like, fucking hell. We've seen Brax literally, end of the rope, Steel, love him or hate him, the man, did everything he could to get around this, to try and find a way back in the scene, do everything right. Nah. Yeah. Oh, what shall I do? Let me give it a go. It's like, fuck that. I don't care if you're not making enough money through the lower end of the scene. Fuck off. Don't do that shit. Who are you going to benefit? You for a couple of grand? Well done, mate. Like, no, that's bullshit.
Hit the nail on the head.
I can kind of empathize to a degree with the situation that some pro players go into. And just with in terms of financial pressures, though, like I can
get a job.
I don't agree with it.
No. You don't get both worlds. You don't get to be up and coming and go through the grind, and then maybe you make it, maybe you don't. That's how it is. You don't go, well, I'm hard done by. I deserve better. If you deserve better, you play better. You maybe get a chance. You don't get gifted the right to make a living off of something so fucking awesome. You know what I mean? Like, this is the 0.01% of people who get to make a living off this, who get to grind this hard. And sometimes you're shit out of luck. Like, how many kids, hopes and dreams of becoming X, Y, and Z get stashed because, simply put, I got to pay rent. Like, welcome to growing up. Shit's hard. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, but like...
Bren was going to be an astronaut until his dreams fell.
Until Pansy put down my dreams just now. Now I've got to go back to working at Tesco.
Unreal. The problem is, it fucking mars everything we do. Every commentating bit of thing we've done, it ruins. I hate it.
Okay, now I don't agree with it. Although it seemed like I was about to say, well, I can see where he's coming from. But what I can do is I can empathize kind of from the viewpoint of a pro player who wants to commit nothing but themselves fully to a game, maybe doesn't want to pick up a part-time job or something to pay rent because they want to commit everything to something. And financially they're struggling in that regard. And that's where proper support from Riot comes in with actual prize money that kind of prevents this idea from cropping in people's heads in the first place. But Just gonna put it out there. Not saying it's cool. Don't fucking do it. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same thing that we had in Overwatch, not match fixing, but boosting. Was like,
yes, boosting was the big
lot of
thing.
tier 2 players, would boost people on the side and get paid for that because the finances simply weren't there.
Would boost.
Yeah, and like Funny Astro as well. I mean, there's a lot of players in the league as well that haven't.
How much value is garnered from being in like a higher like elo? I actually don't know the kind of system of boosting. It doesn't really exist in Counter-Strike because there's not much, credit given to being in a higher rank, right? Like,
well, you can't play in any third-party things for Overwatch. There are no FPLs and stuff like that. So
got it. So this is your main.
Yeah, the ladder is everything. If you're a casual player, if you're not trying to become an actual pro and play in the tier 2 scene, then your worth is based on that. And I think that's maybe going to be a similar thing. I mean, I know that it's a huge thing in League of Legends, boosting and being paid. It's now illegal in Korea as well. And I think that it'll probably be the same in Valorant because people will have the same kind of ties to their skill and their rank. But I don't know. I feel like you really cross the line when you go from ruining a ranked game to ruining a competitive actual
No, there is
match.
a line drawn there. And also prison time, you know?
Yes.
Unless you're in Korea, it is quite literally prison time. There was, I don't know if it was CS players, but in Australia recently, there was a team that got nicked because of match fixing.
Yeah. There was a huge thing in cricket a while back, like an enormous scandal.
Cricket?
I think it was the Pakistani team. And I had, like, cricket's such a boring sport that I had never even considered it. But what the fuck were they doing? I think it was like, I don't even know the terminology. I'm going to look like such an un-British person, but it was like, they were balling a certain amount of overs. I don't know fucking what they were doing, but they were like throwing the ball deliberately wide at certain points and betting on that and managing to collect rather than betting on the matches themselves. They were like fixing other kind of things.
Sure.
And I suppose the ethical line really is just you are robbing people of their money. That's the line, really. It's not that you're ruining matches; it's that you're robbing people of their money.
I'll shift this conversation along. I think we've been on it for quite some time. The upcoming
but it had
tournaments.
to be said, Bren. It had to be said.
It
can't be a cock on the internet.
Yeah. The upcoming tournaments. There's only really one that has teams playing in it. I believe that's really been announced.
But this one is so sick.
The Rise of what's it called? The Rise of the something?
Yeah, this is outside of the Ignition series, right? Because the Ignition series games are coming up, but this is
I'm personally very excited about this tournament. And I'm biased because I am an Overwatch guy, but there is a ton of Overwatch talent on some of these teams. For example,
I feel no loyalty to the Overwatch players.
What?
I feel no loyalty. I'm not saying I don't want to see them succeed, but I just want to see the best.
Some of these are my friends.
Yeah, Bren doesn't have friends.
I feel no loyalty
what
to
are
him,
those?
Johnny.
I'm sorry your UK boys aren't doing too well in actual FPS games, but I think that some of these teams look quite interesting. I think IDQD is the one that stands out to some of us, of course, because it has Twig and Taimu, but they haven't been playing a ton of tournaments, haven't had that impressive results yet, so this feels like a bit of a, last-ditch effort maybe. Then there's like Young and Beautiful, which is an Overwatch organization, has players like Brussen, Danye, Manhattan on it. And also
Manhattan's playing on that
who
team.
used to play for... Yeah.
I coached Manhattan.
He used to play a lot of CS.
God damn.
What?
That's why he never made it.
I suppose. Yeah, this is going to be super interesting. I want to.
Mauzasa is playing in Team B7.
Yeah, you got to
wait. Mauzasa
is this just a fucking Overwatch tournament that they renamed and invited.
Shadowbird is playing.
No, he's not.
Goa.
Where?
Look at Goa.
Really? Is this because the Angry Titans is an Overwatch organization, so they invited their friends? Have we just figured out that this is just an Overwatch?
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Shadowbird.
Rubicon, Sharek, and Forsaken.
Yep.
Jesus Christ. Okay, no, this tournament's a joke.
No, it's not a joke.
We have to talk about the format. It's a round of 32 bracket, singular limb, best of one.
God. There's upset potential here, though. All right, let's. We're gonna wrap up this podcast pretty soon. We got like one more segment after this, but I want everybody to go around and give a hot take in terms of a team that they might expect to do well in this tournament. We'll start with you, Johnny.
Fabriken. Swedish bias. I think that Sippan has done really well after he departed from the Ninjas in Pajamas, and he really started fragging out on the squad. So a couple of Overwatch players on there too, and I am biased because I'm an Overwatch guy, but I'm looking out for this team to become probably the best Swedish team in the mix, even though Dream Chasers is right there as well. Who else? Barbar on it, actually, who used to be an old Opera, I think, late in 1.6, maybe start of CSGO. So, I got my eye on some of these Swedish boys.
What about you, Pansy?
NIP hopefully have a good turnout. I'd like to see the Party Parrots do well. The CIS roster, they've got Angel on there, pretty good old school player. Fish 123, I mean, who are they fielding for this? But I would like to see Taimu do well. I mean, I remember him from before, like Overwatch days, playing games like Dirty Bomb, and I got to cast him and talk to him a little bit. What a game. And I got to talk to him again, and it's nice catching up. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he applies his style to this game, because it's very non-Counter-Strike, and he was close to making it work. He's incredible aim. His operator approach is not CS style by any means, so I'll be really fun. It just as purely like an experiment style of thing. I don't think they'll necessarily win it, but I really want to see where he's at, because I saw him a couple of weeks ago now. I want to see how he's kind of melded into it and if he can kind of rekindle that. But I mean, if Prodigy actually fields a full roster, they're going to win the whole thing.
I'm interested to see what happens with Prodigy, because they are the team that's been invited, not G2, but Mixwell's always played for Prodigy in the past. And as far as I know, like, Prodigy isn't a team, it's like a fucking agency. So I don't even really understand what is going to happen and who they're going to field. But I've got my eye on either Prodigy, if they actually do end up fielding some quasi G2 team under a different name, or Fish 123 if they end up playing with a proper fifth. If they play with Scream again, okay, it'll be interesting to see if they can actually manage to put up decent results, or rather avoid being upsetted, because that's the goal in this tournament. But I'm more interested to see like who that fifth would be. For me, my eyes are really on started from CS a little bit, because they looked like, they've obviously got huge names in them from CS. The French guys of his existence, Happy and Maniac, primarily. And they looked like they were not going to be amazing to start off. And then they actually did really well recently. They beat out, I think it was like Party Parrots, and who the fuck else was in that group? Royals, maybe? Somebody like that? I can't exactly remember. But started from CS, beat out some pretty decent teams. And so I'm excited to see if they can have some kind of competition with the other like ex-CS Prodigy guys, and maybe raise the entire level of the European scene. Because if they really start getting going, then I can see some great rivalries that are already there. Also, Dream Chasers, as Pansy was talking about before, they've been quietly a pretty decent team, so I could see them making a bit of a run.
The one team that I think people have really been forgetting, and I think it's largely because they're just French, and I've got a pretty strained relationship with the French, but I do want to point them out anyways, is Hips team, Hip Hip Hip. They've had middling success, I think, in some tournaments, most notably when they were in the middle of that Defran drama, when Defran said he was going to fuck Hip's mum or something, because they weren't playing on time. That was a long time ago now.
Reasonable things.
Yeah, very reasonable thing to say. But it's a team that I at least want to see succeed, and I think that they could sneak by, especially when you're in this round of 13 best of one bracket. It's actually anything could happen. It's these kind of tournament structures are wacky. You never know what teams are going to be ended up finalizing.
They're the first team to take a best of 3 off Fish 123. Even after Fish 123 lost Ardiis, they still won best of 3s because they were playing against not the other top teams. So I think Hip 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 can maybe make something work. They've got some decent players on that team.
Yeah, I want to mention, I was really impressed by Korea. Yeah, Larsson on Sage, but also Korea's Omen. I was pretty impressed by that because they played pretty proactively with this Paranoid, and that was pretty interesting to see. And then they played this triple duelist composition where they utilized the Omen smokes. So pretty impressed by Korea so far.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the play of the week, which is apparently we're trying to make a segment, a sponsored segment, presumably.
Sponsor money.
Josh, you picked out this play, didn't you?
I did pick out this play, but I feel like it was a really obvious one. Like Bren's player of the week on Plat chat is very just whatever the fuck happens to go through is just
picks coaches,
fever-addled mind at any point. But I've actually been trying to pick some decent plays because
this is a decent play.
They're quite cool.
And also highlights one of my main issues with the map ascent. But yeah, let's let this play. This is Sub Rose's.
Oh, it's a sick.
Was it an ace?
Yeah.
This thing was nasty.
It was Sub Rose's pistol ace against Immortals. When Immortals walk down catwalk,
he's gonna spawn all of them right now. 1, 2, 3.
It's just filth. It's actually filth.
How did he get there before they could see?
They were pressuring A with all 5 on the pistol, and they got pushed back, and he'd already taken the hold of mid.
It's almost like Immortals don't default.
Yeah, it's not a great start, but it was a very impressive beginning, and it absolutely boomed Immortals for the rest of the match, actually. Yeah. They crumbled after that.
That's what I mean. This is the trouble with Immortals. They're a team that crumble easily. They're all green, aren't they, really? But the
therapeutic Brennon hook.
Yeah, I like to talk on the mental state of teams when I have no idea what the mental state actually is of
and
the teams.
coaching
That's
staff.
my thing. But yeah, and also highlights one of my problems with Ascent is that there's so many corners to check if you're trying to take control of mid.
No. Do you know what's really easy? Just hold a default so they can't get to any of those corners. There's like 3 ways you can stare at middle from the attacking side. They opted for 0, and you can see where the issue began with that. You can literally watch the cross from the other side. No, I hate that. It's like, honestly, the clip was excellent. The shots would be like crisp. Like that's prime Sabrosa, just like super ratty, like finds his dirty little angle, just hunkers down. He's happy. But it's like, if you just defaulted, it wouldn't happen.
Wouldn't have happened because you can
you can lean into it. Like if they could have fallen back to this, what time's on that? I actually don't know. Like how late did they leave this?
This was really early in the round.
Exactly. So like, why are you just like heavy leaning and then peeling back to it? Like, what do you think's going to happen? You think a CS team's not going to go for some sort of defensive sided aggression? Like this is stop it, Immortals. Come on, boys. Like I want to see them do well. I said Immortals, I think, are coming in with these like nice ideas of like what we think can work in kind of FPS games. But there's a reason the fundamentals work really well from Counter-Strike. And do you know what? Learn the fundamentals and build on that. Give me something new after you've like locked down those fundamental pieces that obviously make a T side work easy. Like give me that, and then I'll be super impressed.
All right, well, that's gonna do it, I guess. Now, Golden Boy's been trying to give me some tips on how to close out the podcast because Lord knows I need them. Yeah, because every time I don't really know how to close it out that much.
Pansy's the straw.
What did he say to do? Follow and subscribe the channel. I don't know if that works, but you got to subscribe. You got to comment as well.
You can't follow. There's no follow.
Is there no follow function in YouTube?
On YouTube. What the fuck are you talking about?
Right, Kurt,
don't follow.
Like the video.
End it, Kurt.
Psych it.
End it.
No.